Welcome back to Unsolved Mysteries, JonBenet's Web Truths. Please like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for updates. 2 weeks ago, we released a video titled JonBenet Ramsey, Hidden Half-Brother? Armchair Detective / M'Linda Kula, Bill Ramsey Theory Debunk, where we determined the supposed illegitimate son of John's, named Bill Ramsey, was born in 1958, 10 years before John was stationed there in 1968. And that William Lawrence Rohn, aka Bill Ramsey, was actually born to William B Rohn and Nanci K. Harding Rohn of New York. Then last week we released a video titled JonBenet / Bill Ramsey Case, Debunking M'Linda Kula and Armchair Detective's Other False Claims, in which we took issue with, dismantled, and debunked 5 additional false claims of theirs. So you would think that would be the end of the story there. However, this is where the truth in JonBenet's Web Truth shines, because while doing research into the supposed suspect Bill Ramsey, we fall victim to the curse of the JonBenet Ramsey investigation, and that every lead seems to take you down a surprisingly new rabbit hole. However, it appears quite relevant, so on tonight's episode we will raise the question: is there more to the story of William Lawrence Rohn, aka Bill Ramsey? Because as you will see, his biological father actually worked for Bell Laboratories from 1954 to 1983, where a little thing called Unix operating system was created in 1969, which, if you are not familiar with the significance of this in relation to the Ramseys and their business, I will be going over it extensively in this evening's episode. But first we'll take a closer look at the immediate Rohn family, starting with Bill's mother, Nanci K. Harding Rohn, who died at the age of 81 on December 15, 2013, worked shortly as a secretary, legal secretary, and office manager for several businesses, which I would love to know the names of. But around 1975, she suffered a ruptured aneurysm in the brain that changed her life forever and had her recovering and rehabilitating for the remainder of hers. So not really much to or suspicion of Momma Rohn. But this obituary does lead us right into her other son, Stuart Douglas Rohn, whom I believe I have uncovered listed as Douglas Stuart Rohn on this ArrestFacts.com website, which not only provided one picture, but actually provides 2. And in addition to being listed as 5'6", which is the same height as Bill Rohn, aka Ramsey, this also tells us he was locked up in New Jersey, but to be more specific, it also tells us his booking location was in Ocean County, New Jersey, M'Linda and Bill's stomping grounds.
Bill attended a karate school right here in Ocean County, New Jersey. I live in Ocean County, New Jersey.
And at the top states he was born July 3rd, 1964, 5.5 years after Bill was born. As far as what his criminal charges were, they are listed as willful non-support. In other words, child support issues, which do not raise any huge red flags to me. So not much suspicion by me regarding the brother Stuart Douglas or Douglas Stuart Rohn. However, it seemed necessary as he is listed as the brother of William Lawrence Rohn, aka Bill Ramsey. And that leaves us with the final immediate Rohn family member to speak of, the man of the hour, the father, William B Rohn, who died on May 10th, 2013, and whose obituary we had gone over in our prior video 2 weeks ago. However, there was one thing that I had held back at that time, and that was what Father Rohn did for a living, and hopefully you will find this as interesting and suspicious as I have. As the obituary tells us, he developed an interest in electronics and service in the U.S. Navy in World War II. In 1951, he graduated from the Polytechnic Institute of Brooklyn and spent most of his career with Bell Telephone Laboratories, which I find amazing. But they continue. Although initially engaged in military projects, he spent most of his career in the development of highly reliable computers for switching telephone voice and date calls, which I believe is supposed to be data calls. And as you will see, he did a lot of fascinating work for Bell. But it is important to learn a bit more about Bell Telephone Laboratories, commonly known as just Bell Laboratories or Bell Labs, where their slogan is more than meets the eye, and truer words may have never been spoken. But to get to know more about Bell, we'll be referencing a lot of videos featured on the YouTube AT&T Tech channel, whom you should check out if interested in additional information. But to get a better understanding of the history of telephone communication, we will turn to this groovy 1973 promo video titled The Far Sound, that opens like this. features the following clip explaining how telephones originally worked.
Central, will you connect me to 1-5? Do you hear me? Jimmy, is that you? Hey, talk up.
Oh, my darling, last night was so
Send me 2 men to Mendione.
She said that. Well, I gave her a piece of my mind. And then you know what?
If this old switchboard could talk, wow, your ears would sizzle.
Young man, you brought my daughter home after dark. I don't believe that poppycock about the horse going late.
1880. We take Alexander Graham Bell's invention for granted today. Perhaps we should. But isn't it incredible that millions and millions of people can talk simultaneously to practically any spot on Earth? In the beginning, back in the old days, the telephone was something of an oddity, to say the least. You'd pick up this receiver to see that the line was clear. Then you'd hang up and ring with this crank. Then you'd pick it up again and tell the operator what number you wanted.
Central.
6A, please.
Thank you.
She'd hook it up for you on her switchboard. If there was anybody home, they'd answer and you could talk. Sometimes.
However, that was way back in the day, and as you will see in this next 1940 promo video, the dial phone would soon be introduced. And as you will see, while trying to teach people how to use a new rotary phone, telephones at the time worked and sounded quite different than they do today.
Soon after the last number is dialed, you will usually hear this tone. That's the ringing signal. It tells you that the telephone at the number you called is ringing. The party at this number will hear a clear, evenly spaced ring that sounds like this. The ring will continue until the telephone is answered, or if no one answers, until you hang up. When you've dialed a number and that line is busy, you'll hear a signal like this. If you hear the busy signal, simply hang up and wait a few minutes for the people who are talking on the line to finish, and try again. When you raise your telephone and listen for the dial tone, but discover someone else talking on the line, hang up and try again after you've waited a reasonable time. Also, if you lift your receiver and hear the clicks that indicate someone else on the line is dialing, hang up as carefully as possible.
Yeah, Martha, don't you realize those are party lines people used to have to use? But let's allow the presenter to finish her lesson as she tells us.
The main things to remember are, first, look up the number in your new directory. Second, raise your telephone and listen for the dial tone. Third, dial each number carefully, making sure you bring the dial all the way around to the finger stop each time. Then let go. Don't try to hurry it back. I'm sure if you follow these simple rules, you'll find your new dial telephones easy to operate, convenient to use, and quick in service. Thank you.
No, thank you. But as you'll see in our next 1961 promo video titled Challenge of Change or Seeing the Digital Future, there were a lot of advancements in telecommunications over the years.
The space age is upon us, in more ways than one. But such down-to-earth problems of office space need no longer exist, because already there's a solution. Data phone service, allowing a machine to talk to another machine over the telephone, passing along information stored in the space-saving language of machine code.
Mary D'Angelo, please. Hello, Mary. This is Alice. How are you? We want to send out some orders now. Can my machine talk to your machine? Thanks, Mary. Here we go.
Simple, most good ideas are. Like this compact telephone console that answers your needs of today and leaves room for your growth tomorrow.
Good morning, Benson Company.
Is Mr. Jordan in, please?
Yes, he is. I'll connect you with Mr. Jordan. One moment, please. I'm sorry, Mr. Williams is out. Will you speak with someone else?
And this new idea that brings speed and ease to your everyday telephoning.
Margaret, we've got a rush order on 100 of these new X207 wrenches.
100 X207.
Yeah, will you call all our suppliers, see how many you can get immediately?
Yes, sir. I'll call right away.
Thanks very much.
Good morning, Mr. Thompson. This is Miss Jones at Morgan's. We need 100 X207 wrenches right away. How soon can you send them over?
Gee, I've only got 30 in stock.
Can you send those over right away?
Sure. By noon.
Thanks, Mr. Thompson.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
The card dialer, an electronic finger that dials for you.
Hello, Mr. Novak. This is Miss Jones at Morgan's. We need 70 X207 wrenches right away. How soon can you send them over?
And this?
What the devil's that? That's me. My office calling. That deal on the Hawkins property must have come through. You mean they dialed it? Yeah, I've got my own personal number. Excuse me, I'll call in. Hey, let me see that. Sure. How about that? What'll they think of next?
And boy, if he could only see where we are today. But that is all greatly due to something called the Bell System, which I will let this next 1976 promo video titled What is the Bell System tell you about.
You know, what a person does for a living sure makes a difference in how he views things. Yep, I'm a telephone man, And I suppose we look at many things in a special way. Take that house there. And that wire, designed to last a lifetime. And that dial tone. She expects it to be there 24 hours a day. Is our new customer impressed, knowing that she can now reach any one of 150 million phones in the country in a matter of seconds? Of course not. But I'll tell you something. It's been 15 years since I installed my first phone, and I'm still impressed. Think about it. By merely lifting the receiver, you hook into a system so sophisticated that it can carry billions of calls, television programs, and data messages simultaneously around the world. Why, just a phone across town, your call might pass through hundreds of switch points. My problem, though, is trying to make it all understandable, to show how all the pieces and people and companies that make up the world's largest telephone organization, the Bell system, fit together. First off, almost 1 million people work for Bell at some 27,000 different locations across the country. 3 out of 4 phones in the country are Bell. Bell assets are worth 12 times Fort Knox. I mean, we're big. Yet, you gotta be big to meet a big nation's needs, today as well as tomorrow. Now, when you speak of the Bell system, you're talking about a lot of companies. But it's easier if you think of us as 5 major parts. There's Bell Laboratories. There's Western Electric. There's Long Lines. There's the local telephone company like mine, 23 altogether. And finally, AT&T, the parent company. 5 parts, but known collectively as the Bell system. Now, some people call us simply Bell, or the telephone company, or even Ma Bell.
Ma Bell, with the ill communication. Ma Bell, we got the ill communication. Ma Bell, got the ill communication. Ma Bell,
The name's not all that vital. You could call us Tinkerbell, so long as we do our job. What is important, though, is how all these parts work together. How they've got to work together to keep phone service in America the best in the world. Let's look a little closer at the parts. First off, Bell Laboratories. Its job is to design and develop the products, systems, and services to keep communications purring and to respond to the customers we serve nationwide. Down through the years, Bell Labs people have received more than 17,000 patents. That's like 1 patent a day for 50 years. Now, some of these inventions didn't exactly change the world, but some did. Like the transistor. Yep, 3 Bell scientists got the Nobel Prize for it. It changed the way just about everything is made. Not just phones, but computers and radios and hearing aids and so on. It started the whole electronics revolution and even made the space age possible. So, briefly, Bell Labs is the first part, working for and with the rest of the Bell system.
Okay, so now that we have a bit of a better understanding how Bell Labs fits into the whole Bell system, we come back to the modern day, where just earlier this year they held the 2022 Linux Conference Australia online, featuring the keynote speaker Brian Kernighan, which I will let the host give his credentials as he tells us.
Brian Kernighan received his PhD from Princeton in 1969 and was in the Computing Science Research Center at Bell Labs until 2000. He is now a professor of the Computer Science Department at Princeton.
So I would say he is pretty well qualified to discuss this topic, but let's see what we can glean from his mind while he discusses things further in his presentation and asks,
So, what is Bell Labs? What was it? Let me give you a little bit of history. So in 1885, boy, you lose track of time. In 1885, AT&T, the American Telephone and Telegraph Company, was founded. And essentially over the next 30-ish years, it came to provide telephone service for the entire United States. And it was a big, complicated operation to do that sort of thing. And the company realized quite early that they needed technical expertise to be able to provide this basically highly technical service. And so they created a part of the company, which they called Bell Telephone Laboratories, to do research, to figure out how to do things better so that telephone service could be improved. And that was originally in New York City, very close to right on the Hudson River on the west side of New York, in 1925. And then it was moved to suburban New Jersey, X marks the spot, in about 1960. And so this is what Bell Labs looked like from the air at the Murray Hill, New Jersey location in 1961. And you can see it's a pretty big place. You get a sense of the scale from the size of the cars in the parking lot scattered around it. And the operation at Murray Hill basically did research in primarily physical sciences, things like physics, chemistry, and materials. And there were about 3,000 people working in research in this operation, at least 1,000 of whom had PhDs. So you can think of it as a very large specialized university, but without students. And an awful lot of important inventions came out of that. The most obvious one is the transistor, perhaps, but the laser, fiber optics, and a wide variety of other things. And over the years, depending on how you count them, 8, 10, 12 Nobel Prize winners as well did work at Bell Labs. So that was just the research part. Then there were roughly, call it 25,000 people at peak in a part of the company that was also called Bell Labs, which focused on development. That is, taking things from research and trying to convert them into things that would actually be useful in the providing telephone service. And then Bell Labs was a small part of AT&T. At its peak, AT&T had well over, 1 million employees, and so it was a very, very large operation.
So now we know AT&T was originally founded in 1885, and Bell Telephone Laboratories was opened in 1925 in New York City, to which we know Daddy Rohn started working in 1954, and the company relocated to Murray Hill, New Jersey around 1960. But he also told us there were only around 3,000 people working in research there, while there were around 25,000 people at the peak working in the development. So at most, there were only around 28,000 people working officially for Bell Labs at their peak. And this is where it begins to become relevant to what John Ramsey and his business Access Graphics were going to do in the future. But let's go back to our recent conference and allow Mr. Kerningham to continue as he informs us.
The people who were in the Computing Science Research Center at that time were, as I said, working on various kinds of software like programming languages and especially operating systems. And so in 1961, MIT created a system called CTSS, the Compatible Time-Sharing System. And it was led by Fernando Corby, who was an amazing, nice guy, and a very, very forward-thinking kind of computer person. So CTSS, created in 1961, was a time-sharing system. That is, a system where there was a single computer and people accessed it from basically remote devices, sort of like cloud computing before there was such an idea. It was such a success that people at MIT said we could do this better, and so they designed a system which was called Multics, the Multiplexed Information and Computing Service. And the idea really was an information utility, something like cloud computing today. And it was going to be new and improved and better in every single possible respect. So this was a big job. And so MIT enlisted the services of two other organizations. One was General Electric, which at the time made computers, big computers.
But we also know from prior episodes that they were founded in 1886, 1 year after AT&T, that they formed GE Aviation in 1917, and perhaps most importantly, they purchased John Ramsey's business Access Graphics from Lockheed Martin in November of 1997, less than 1 year after JonBenet's untimely demise. Now getting back to the topic at hand, Mr. Kerningham's continues.
And the other was Bell Labs, which at the time had a great deal of expertise in programming languages and operating systems. So what you have there is three different institutions, geographically separated by very wide distance, roughly the distance from Sydney to Perth, let's say, in the case of General Electric, and very different organizations, a university, a research lab, and a profit-making company. And you don't have to be much of a student of institutions to realize that this was kind of a recipe for things not working super well. Multics was late. It didn't, at least in the early days, work well. And so in 1969, handwriting on the wall, Bell Labs withdrew from the project. And this left people like the folks on the bottom row there with nothing to do.
However, that is not quite the full story, as Mr. Thompson and Ritchie appear to have known exactly what to do, as is evident in the following 1982 Bell Labs promo video, which features quite a few awkward engineers and goes as such.
Back in 1969, a couple of computer scientists here at Bell Labs started to develop some programs they needed for their own use. What Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie started developing then has evolved into the Unix operating system, which by now is widely used not only in the Bell system, but in other places around the world. In the next few minutes, we're going to tell you about a few of the problems that Unix is useful for, and we're going to talk some about both operating systems in general and the Unix operating system in particular to show you how Unix helps people solve problems.
If you look particularly at Bell Laboratories, but at high technology industry in general, there's a tremendous need for better techniques and tools to make our work more productive. We just simply cannot write all the software that needs to be written. In fact, a good analogy is that a number of years ago, when telephone calls were switched not by computers but by human beings, operators, people predicted that sooner or later the entire population of the United States would have to be telephone operators to switch all of the calls that needed to be switched. We have the same problem in programming productivity today. Now, keeping large amounts of software working and keeping it working in the face of change simply takes a lot of people. In the Bell system, we have many millions of lines of software. We have thousands of mini computers, we have hundreds of very large computers, and there is a lot of software that needs to be kept working. There's all different sorts of software. There is the switching software that switches your telephone calls. There is administrative software that administers the entire process. And there is, for instance, the billing software. I mean, how many systems do you know give you a bill for something that costs as little as 10 or 20 cents? There's a lot of software. So we need lots of techniques and tools to make this more productive.
The programs which tell a computer how to switch a telephone call, or compute a payroll, or play an electronic game are called application software. There's another type of software, the programs which control the resources of the computer itself, the memory of the computer, the processing elements, and the terminals connected to the computer. This latter type of software is called an operating system. Another way of saying what an operating system is that it's a collection of programs which make the intricate hardware of the computer seem more simple and comprehensible from the point of view of an applications programmer, so that the applications programmers can create software more easily.
We're trying to make computing as simple as possible. In the late 1960s, Dennis Ritchie and I realized that the then current operating systems were much too complex. We attempted to reverse this trend by building a small, simple operating system on a mini computer.
Well, what we wanted to preserve was not just a good programming environment in which to do programming, but a system around which a community could form, fellowship. We knew from experience that the essence of communal computing, as supplied by remote access time-sharing systems, is not just to type programs into a terminal instead of a key punch, but to encourage close communication.
Unix started out as a two-man effort, and by now it's used all over Bell Labs. We have close to 20,000 computer terminals in this company, roughly one per employee, and most of them are used for communicating with Unix systems. One of the main reasons that Unix is popular around here is because it provides graceful facilities for decomposing complex computing tasks into simple subtasks.
So hopefully that made some sense to you. But it made a lot of sense to many people, companies, and corporations, and made a huge impact on the computer technology industry as a whole. In fact, in 1998, both Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie received the National Medal of Technology from the recently re-elected president at the time, Bill Clinton. But they made Hollywood history in 1993 when they were featured in the following clip.
We can call for help? We gotta reboot the system first.
The door locks! Ellie, boot up the door locks!
All the files of the whole park. It tells you everything. I gotta find the right file.
Trying to reach the gun.
I can't get it unless I move. This might be the right file. This isn't the right file. You got it! Yes! 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 This is it!
What works?
Phone, security systems, you name it, we got it.
And with that, not only did Unix save the world from the dinosaurs of Jurassic Park, but they also provided the operating systems necessary to even make such a movie possible. Now you may say, well, that is great for Unix operating system, but what does that have to do with the Ramsey family, JonBenet, and more importantly, John Ramsey and his business, Access Graphics? Well, to find out, I will have to reference back to a few short article clips that I featured in my previous released episode 5 titled Just Business, in which we discussed the fact that Unix operating system was created at AT&T's Bell Laboratories, therefore was the sole property of AT&T. And to learn more, we turn to this unix.org website under the History and Timeline section, which states, in a move intended to unify the market in 1987, AT&T announced a pact with Sun Microsystems, the leading proponent of the Berkeley-derived strain of Unix. However, the rest of the industry viewed the development with considerable concern. Believing that their own markets were under threat, they clubbed together to develop their own new open systems operating system. Their new organization was called the Open Software Foundation, or OSF. In response to this, the AT&T Sun faction formed Unix International. And once again, you might say, well, that is great for Sun Microsystems, but what does that have to do with John Ramsey? Well, to find out, we will jump back into the aforementioned prior episode. And referencing back to our favorite December 96 Daily Camera article, in which author Tom Locke tells us that Access Graphics, a wholly owned subsidiary of Bethesda, Maryland-based Lockheed Martin Corporation, gets about 60% of its revenue from selling hardware and software from Sun Microsystems Incorporated of Mountain View, California. But John Ramsey further confirms his strong reliance on Sun Microsystems and their products during his June of 1998 interview with Detective Lou Smith and DA prosecutor Mike Kane, in which Kane asks, "What led up to that?" Ramsey says, "Well, expansion? We were growing. Sun Microsystems was a big part of our business. We were trying to develop some balance, develop new sources. One of the ways we could do that was to move geographically. So now that we know that Access gets 60% of its revenues from, and John said they were a big part of his business." And we will reference back to the aforementioned December of 1996 Daily Camera article to find out exactly why, as the article states. Access is one of 2 distributors for Sun in the United States that is authorized to sell to resellers, which get customer support from Access and selling to end users. But to find out who the other authorized distributor of Sun products in the United States is, we turn to this prior Tom Locke Daily Camera article written on October 8, 1996, titled Access Graphics Sales Soar. Distributor of hardware and software has grown nearly 2,000% since 1990, in which they state, the other authorized distributor is Maricel Incorporated of El Segundo, California. And to find out their fortune, we turn to a webpage, crn.com, with an article titled Maricel Says Bye-Bye to IT Distribution, which was written August 16, 2004, by a man named Scott Campbell, who states the following. Maricel was founded in 1980 as SoftCell Computer Products, a software distributor. In April 1990, it merged with Micro America, a hardware distributor, to become Maricel. By the mid-1990s, Maricel had become the 3rd largest broadline distributor behind Ingram Micro and Tech Data, with annual revenue of several $billion. To which I must add, Tech Data would later purchase a company named Avnet for $2.6 billion in 2016, while Avnet had purchased John Ramsey's business Access Graphics from General Electric for $410.3 million in 2007. And both potential persons of interest, Clay Henderson and what I believe to be his girlfriend's CEO, Anna McDermott, played a big part in. Yet he concludes, but behind the growth, the company lost hundreds of millions of dollars. A majority share was sold to investment firm Stonington Partners in 1997, and Maricel went through a dramatic reorganization that led to the selling of its hardware business, including its successful Sun Microsystems-focused Mocha business to Aero Electronics and Maricel Canada to Cinex. So Access Graphics was not the only company that got knocked off their game, as Scott McNeely would say, and that further exemplifies why Patsy Ramsey said,
"Someone came into our home, not only killed our child, but killed everything that we had built and worked hard for to prepare for the future. It took a lot of people down with it."
And while it did, just as you said, take a whole lot of people down with it, it also built people back up, the Henderson family in particular. But this is not a video focusing on them, or the Ramseys. This video is in regards to the supposed Bill Ramsey, also known as William Lawrence Rohn. More specifically, his biological father, William B Rohn, whom I found an article about in this March of 1975 Bell Labs Record magazine, where we can learn all about exactly what he did while working there. So getting right into it, we find this write-up specifically on William B Rohn, which is a bit too long-winded for me to read here, but if you are like me and you want to geek out on it, you can pause the video or take a screenshot to read fully. The main reason I bring this article up is that it provides us with a visual image of this incredibly influential man. But to see why I believe this man is so incredibly influential, we turn to this worldradiohistory.com webpage, which features a more manageable version of Daddy Rohn's resume and tells us, William B. Rohn received his Bachelor in Science degree for Electrical Engineering in 1951 from the Polytechnic Institute of Brooklyn, and that he began working for Bell Telephone Laboratories in 1954, which we know at its peak had about 35,000 employees total. But they continue, Mr. Rohn performed operations analysis studies for the SAGE air defense system and missile projects. And before we go any further, I believe we should learn a bit more about this so-called SAGE project by utilizing what looks to be a 1960s promo video put out by the U.S. Air Force and the Western Electric Company that goes as follows.
dangerous threats to our nation's security is the possibility of attack by high-speed enemy bombers armed with nuclear weapons. These bombers can strike at supersonic speeds from many directions and altitudes to confuse our defense and delay the dispatch of interceptor weapons. In a mass raid, high-speed bombers could be in on us before we could determine their tracks. And then it would be too late to act. We cannot afford to take that chance. It is to meet this threat that the Air Force has been developing SAGE, the Semi-Automatic Ground Environment System, a network of geographical defense sectors covering the continental United States and extending into Canada. Each sector has as its focal point a computer installation known as a direction center. A group of sectors comprise a NORAD division, where the key point is a computer installation called a combat center. Combat centers are headquarters for higher echelons of command, integrating the individual sectors into a centralized defense system. Let's suppose an enemy launched a surprise attack with high-speed aircraft, intent on destroying our great city. The long-range radars which constantly scan the skies detect all planes in flight. The information is flashed electronically to the direction center, where the computer instantaneously makes the necessary calculations and displays its findings as tracks on the scopes at the consoles. In the air surveillance section, tracking operators monitor all traffic in the sector and quickly relay unidentified tracks to operators in the identification section who determine that the tracks are hostile. An alarm sounds in the weapons direction section. The senior director and senior weapons director size up the threat using all the up-to-the-minute information displayed before them on the scope. On the basis of this information, constantly supplied by the computer, the track is assigned to a weapons director who decides that interceptor aircraft should be sent against the enemy. Immediately, the weapons director assigns the control of the intercept to an intercept director, whose situation display shows him that fighter craft have been scrambled. The situation display also indicates that the interceptors are assigned to track A-137. I indicates interceptor aircraft. G, that tracking is good. 1, the number of the controlling weapons director. 2, the number of the intercept director. A vector symbol indicates the heading of the fighters as they fly toward the point at which interception will take place. RL-15 is the intercept flight code number. Thus, the intercept director has the information he needs to direct his portion of the air battle. And the battle begins. At 28,000 feet, the bombers speed toward their targets. But jet interceptors roar to the attack, guided by electronic impulses received directly from the computer, supervised by the intercept director miles away. Now comes the test. Were the calculations correct? Were our judgments right? With weapons rushing toward each other faster than the speed of sound, the slightest error can mean failure, and bombers free to strike with nuclear bombs. The console display shows the intercept weapons approaching, and the battle is joined. The fighters lock on target, and rockets are fired. The battle is over. The enemy destroyed. But one important task yet remains for the computer: to guide the interceptors safely back to their bases. provides us, on the North American continent, the finest possible air defense against attack by manned bombers. The number one threat of today, and quite a few tomorrows.
So that's some pretty heavy stuff, but let's see what other stuff he worked on at Bell Labs. As this states, he worked on the development of a traffic simulator for the Unicom project, which is basically universal communication between all airlines. But they also say he worked on the development and testing of call processing programs for the 4-wire number 1 ESS system for the government, which we will learn more about this ESS system from the following 1965 Western Electric ESS promo video, which goes as such.
Western Electric, 30 years ago, before solid-state electronics and transistors. From factories like this came a nationwide switching network connecting millions of telephones. If only 2 phones existed, only 2 wires would be needed to connect them. 10 phones would require 90 wires to reach each other, if no switching means were available. The 85 million phones in actual use today would need an astronomical number of wires without an adequate switching system. The switching network built by Western Electric includes over 10,000 major switching centers that enable any phone to reach any other phone using the minimum number of channels. The network has served and grown without interruption for nearly a century. New products and techniques have kept it up to date, always working. Today, the electronics revolution has transformed manufacturing. New kinds of challenges confront communications scientists and engineers. To make today's components, they must probe matter more deeply. To solve problems of material characteristics, to deal with temperatures from 200 degrees below to 2,000 degrees above zero Fahrenheit. They must create new materials and shape them on a molecular scale. This requires new tools, new processing techniques, an entirely new manufacturing environment. Precision is essential at every step in processing and measurement. Microscopes and instruments extend the capabilities of eyes and fingers, increasing skills. Atmosphere must be controlled, from tremendous pressures to a high vacuum previously found only in space. And dirt and dust must be excluded. Sometimes light and color must be controlled. From this new environment is now emerging the hardware of an important development in communications. Number 1, ESS, an electronic switching system. Designed by Bell Telephone Laboratories, ESS is manufactured by Western Electric for the Bell system to meet the challenge of expanding telephone needs. ESS represents a radical advance in making telephone connections. Virtually all electronic, it uses magnetically stored information to control the operations necessary to put through a call. An incoming call is detected by scanners, which report it to Central Control. Central Control routes the number being called into a temporary memory unit, where it is held. Then, using the semi-permanent memory unit, Central control determines whether the call is local or long distance, and what lines must be used to make connections. This information is contained in magnetized memory cards that function somewhat like punched cards used with business machines. The cards can be easily removed for alteration of the information. When Central Control has obtained all the data necessary for completing the call, it issues instructions to the switching network. The network, together with circuits that lead to trunk and local lines, performs the physical functions that connect the telephones. The time from the moment dialing is completed to the moment the called number rings is a small fraction of a second. ESS offers uniquely flexible, convenient service. It can transfer your calls to another phone when you're away from your own. If you're busy talking, it can automatically signal you that another call is trying to reach you. It can set up conference calls. And dialing just a few digits will connect you to numbers you call frequently. The key to these services is stored program control.
And William B Rohn, aka Daddy Rohn, was quite versed in SPC, or Stored Program Control, as his resume concludes. During the initial development of TSPS, which we will get into in a moment, he supervised a group that developed maintenance programs for the SPC equipments. He presently supervises a group responsible for stored program control programming and planning for extended trunking arrangements, or router and system connections. But to learn more about what TSPS is, we turn back to our opening clip, the 1973 Bell Labs promo clip titled The Far Sound, in which they state,
This is a traffic service position system. It's being installed in telephone offices across the country. With it, operators can handle far greater numbers of calls and help customers faster than ever before. It takes a fantastic amount of know-how to design, build, install, and man communications equipment such as this. That's where Western Electric and the telephone companies come in.
And while this engineer is likely perfecting his work on future gang hand signs, I think we should take a quick look at the Wikipedia definition of stored program control, which states, Stored Program Control, SPC, is a telecommunications technology used for telephone exchanges, controlled by a computer program stored in the memory of the switching system. SPC was the enabling technology of electronic switching systems, ESS, developed in the Bell system in the late 1950s, and may be considered the third generation of switching technology. But they conclude, Stored Program Control was invented in 1954 by Bell Labs scientist Emma Schneider Hoover, who reasoned that computer software could control the connection of telephone calls, which corresponds with his previous work with traffic service position systems. But to fully understand the full implications of the work done by William B Rohn while at Bell Labs, we will view one final clip from a 1961 promotional film titled Seconds for Survival, which goes as follows.
Since man's earliest days, he has relied on swift reflex actions to stay alive when danger threatens. Our military leaders took this as a lesson in planning the defense of our continent. They say that today, when a surprise attack would allow us only a few minutes' warning, our defense system must be able to detect the enemy and react as quickly as a human being. To that end, the United States and Canada decided to give this continent eyes, brains, and muscles that could react as swiftly as yours and mine, and with even greater efficiency. It seemed at the time an impossible goal. But let me tell you what we actually have today. To detect jet bombers long before they reach our shores, rings of radar eyes have been built across the northern part of the continent. We also have radar looking out to sea, in land-based installations along our coasts, in towers planted offshore, in picket ships, airplanes and blimps. Many of these radar posts serve as eyes for the SAGE air defense system, which can automatically identify, track, and direct the destruction of enemy planes.
So that accounts for the SAGE system, but they continue.
If an enemy attacked, the alert would flash to the brains of our whole defense system, to NORAD, the North American Air Defense Command Headquarters in Colorado Springs.
Which is kind of creepy considering its proximity to Boulder, yet they continue.
At the same time, civil defense agencies would warn the people in our cities. Then our muscles in the form of jet interceptors and surface-to-air missiles would get into action, while our long-range bombers and missiles are on their way to destroy the enemy's bases. All of these eyes, brains, and muscles give us strength. But we need one more thing. Perhaps the most vital element of all, a nerve system over which communications can be flashed in an instant's time, so that our defense system can spring into action in one controlled thrust. Our military leaders knew this continent already had such a nerve system, designed for peacetime use, but ready to serve the cause of defense. Much of this nerve system is hidden underground, but there are places where you can see it clearly against the sky. I'm speaking of the nation's telephone network, whose microwave towers and cables lace the farthest village and town into a vast web of communications. This is the system that makes our defense go. It's the same network you use when you pick up your telephone to call someone in a distant city. And it's the same network the nation uses to carry on its daily business. Almost everywhere you look, you can see the vision of Alexander Graham Bell in millions of telephones carrying the voices of a nation, and in the facilities and services which bring you news, television programs, and the pictures you see in your newspapers. And telephone networks today don't stop at the waterline. We have underwater cables that span the oceans. They're important to overseas communications because they're not affected by magnetic storms and other atmospheric disturbances. These cables provide instant all-weather communications with Hawaii, Alaska, Puerto Rico, and Cuba, Great Britain, continental Europe, and with our overseas military bases. Today's telephone network far exceeds Mr. Bell's grandest dream. And every last inch of it can be linked together to serve the home, business, or continental defense.
And that seems to have very nicely tied everything together rather well concerning Daddy Rohn's work. However, it raises additional questions regarding this William L. Rohn character running around claiming to be Bill Ramsey, especially considering what we have learned regarding his father and the work that he did for Bell Laboratories while he worked there from 1954 to 1983. While perhaps coincidentally the Unix operating system was created there in 1969, which seems kind of sus to me, as at its peak they only had around 28,000 employees. But the fact that his father even worked within the industry ignites my suspicions of both the father and the son, and makes me wonder if the father happened to have known or known of John Ramsey, or if John knew him or knew of him. However, perhaps it's just a coincidence that he worked in the industry.
And if it is, please explain to me how that happened.
But on this rare occasion, I am going to agree with something M'Linda Kula actually said, as she states,
I don't believe in coincidences, ladies and gentlemen, and I believe that you are all smart enough to see something is very wrong here.
And yes, I also do not believe in coincidences and believe something is very wrong here. Just not for any of the reasons that M'Linda provided. However, she still should be pleased, as I now also believe there actually may be more to the story of William Lawrence Rohn, aka M'Linda Kula's Bill Ramsey. Just nothing like we thought before. But for now, I will conclude this episode of JonBenet's Web Truths. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for updates. And although for the next few weeks I will be re-releasing shorter clips of my previously released videos while I work on Season 2 and some things in my personal life, please watch them, like them, and share them with others, in hopes that we can build a bigger audience to share these truths with. JonBenet's Web Truths. And before long, our new eye-opening round 2 episodes will be upon us. You will know them by the use of our new Eyes Wide Open logo. But thank you to my almost 300 subscribers and all my other viewers. In less than 6 months, we have exceeded 4,000 view hours and 23,000 total views, which has not been an easy feat considering the opposition and staleness of this case, but we trek on. So make sure to check your subscription status and stay tuned for the next run, because you won't want to miss this. But to see my full episode debunking Bill Ramsey as John Ramsey's biological son, click on the upper left. To see my full episode taking issue with M'Linda Kula and the Armchair Detective's other false claims, click on the upper right. And to subscribe and check out my full channel, click on the icon on the lower right. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one.